Hello, humanity and Americans. Through modern countries, including our own, our campuses, there was an entrenched breaching method that was through our own sensing us through a method slash S, appreciating what algorithms are about and appreciating what the database relativity slash IES of our of our names and of our relativity to each other, individually grouped and together. As we'll notice, the identity of hyper simultaneous, so to speak. It is, in other words, it has the other species bodies, individual grouped and together species body. It has our own this way. There is a hyper additional nature of simultaneous nature. That is not the other species bodies. That is not our own. People go, oh God, and they bring a nature with it. See, positive, there are natures of positive treatments and negative treatments that are simultaneously and depends of either one or the differences between that, like with, again, as entertained, it can't entertain how hyper additionally. In other words, there is that identity of relativity that is constant, and it is variable because it is constant, and we are the variable. And what we observe is the variable. Even the things that are constant, where it is showing us the constant and the hyper is being made by more hyper constant. Its identity relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that. Or it is forced from here, where Earth's a special difference are distinct from but non-distinct and simultaneously as your own. For example, you could observe also it comes with a hyper simultaneous. Just like the all parts of your body, like the tip of your nail. It yourself has a semi-nature relationship to your complete identity. And that itself has a semi-nature relationship to and as the complete identity that is not. It can't fit in temporary space nature. But it is its complete identity of relativity to itself, only increasing. And because the value of that too, only increasing with the portion that can, is inseparable from each distinct identity of each identity. Every finite, the smallest part of yourself, all grouped parts of yourself, and your complete self. For example, that's what the other species bodies show us. In other words, the fish did not invent how the fish have eyes that look like human eyes. The animals, and if you, in other words, people who own pets, you'll know, they communicate. They'll ignore you if you don't aware of it. In other words, but see, we are in systems now A through Z, tactical terrier from how nature employed names A through Z to be observed. And this is also the difference between being capable of observing as the ancients actually had. In other words, all descriptions of the ancients became criminally foreign influence because human names A through Z were forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to defend themselves and uses of the names of the sciences as systems tactical terrier. They were forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to become criminally foreign influenced / hyper criminally foreign influenced. And there's a funk because this breaching method knew that nature itself would continually demonstrate itself to us. For example, nature increasingly demonstrates to us a human fact. Achieving nature breaching method is a scientific value that is one of the things constantly that the worst negatives with each country's history were really about. And see, those negatives are being used as the breaching method employed them to be used, to keep blamed on other things, others, ourselves. The real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and nature. And then self-value means to get away with that. While identities of industries, identities of ground voicings names, which we are hyper additionally per nature, locations names, locations, areas, and states, everywhere before each modern country was born, they're already forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded by criminal foreign influences / hyper criminal foreign influences. That was also with the difference between that being overt criminal enterprises, private ones, or the three branches of government as they are manifest, and the exceptions tied to them, like prisons, like the state's corrections offices, like their state's judicial offices, and campuses of all ages and natures. People don't realize that fire campuses and that medical campuses are also campuses. And they don't realize where and how it be totally distinct campuses with fake things being and having been put in place of what is actually recorded, and passions and emotions behind that relative to industries that are interstates. There are complete strangers, and the difference between strangers or people who know each other or what is also used. See, we have the same color eyes, we have different color eyes at the same time because nature communicates with difference. Because it is that difference. Every identity of volume is a distinct identity of relationship to itself, and value as its relationship to itself, the hyper simultaneous. So, in other words, the nature of debate contains quality / qualities, plural, aspect / aspects in nature as criminal insidiousness / hypercriminal insidiousness. And per science, this is to discern that we know, which was criminally foreign influence, unnatural, then that names A through Z wanted nothing to do with. And we know also simultaneously, if we look at this properly, all those exceptions in exception nature, like criminal insidiousness as nature, as a means to discern a negative identity relationship to itself, were as positive. So there's a difference between making positives out of negatives that are making criminal insidiousness natures of positive and apparent motivations. Because those were also propagated, needed at locations A through Z. Forgiveness, for example, regarding interpretations of religions and where they speak about the law. See, we were separate, humanity was separated from the identity of sophistication necessary to be able to discern the difference between positive natures of criminal insidiousness as positives, in other words, and with negative descriptions. Violence, people that are passionately about violence are in the furtherance as a certain type of victim / hyper victim predator / hyper predator, fact driven nature oriented. With that, overtly, every American knows, and we want to heal it right now. But so we can't do it while we're entertaining the practicality of systems that have no practicality. With the descriptions of calm or order or aggression There is mass changing in fabric. There originally and still, this breaching method knew that what would be manifest would be readings of statutes, readings of precedents, syntax of functions, dependencies upon it. That would be criminal insidiousness, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, defenses, styles of logic, natures of logic, inherited without only having been known. So must understand that fact, human nature, torture / extortion / slavery method. We're supposed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington. We're supposed to be honest about how he had agreed to use James Madison's plan and his founders, coupled with George Washington's soldiers. And then they went and counter-extorted at 13 locations. And that was also only possible because of the human fact, human nature breaching method against everyone that no one wanted. But it was except for how they made exceptions, because they have forced roles already having been sustained. The design of suburban homes had already been designed before America's founders were even born. And slavery had been held manifest, sickly distinctly, while sickly non-distinctly simultaneously. See, those negatives can be made into hyper positives. And where nature's identity, its identity in relationship to itself, and the value of that. It shows us this and more. But we have those demonstrations replaced. We have our founders blamed for slavery, leaving out how they had to hide their roles, countering the breaching method. Or they didn't hide it. They had a constitutional convention. They had a Declaration of Independence. They had to be counter-extorted. They had to be forced. And they didn't have free speech there because we know that slavery was left, entrenched north and south. We know the difference between how the North and the South were forced to fight against slavery. That's what they're forced to fight against, because in other words, slavery against everyone. Sickly distinctly, because then functionally, the laws didn't anyone entertain that. In other words, against themselves, if they voice it against how it's non-distinctly slavery against everyone, they get sentenced through their own. Everyone was fact, human nature enslaved. Therefore, everyone was physically enslaved. And this had come before modern countries had to start with all groupings to defend themselves, just like America had to defend themselves with a coalition after the World Trade Center attack. They had names that were involved with all countries that were involved with that and the counter leading up to it in the context and since. So watch my videos in my shadowboxing playlist. But watch Judge Napolitano's live streams too. Ugh.